Again, the topic is hair loss and how to fight back for this week. And this is a rehashing of a webinar that I did a few weeks ago, maybe early on when I first started doing these webinars. I've changed a couple things, but if you were here last time, there are going to be a few slides that look familiar, but there's also a little bit of new information as well. And of course, I do like to mention that if you have any questions or commentary or concerns, by all means, there is question and answer at the end, but at the bottom left-hand of your screen, you should see a button that essentially says Q&A question. Feel free to select that to signal my attention, and I'm happy to answer. You can always put yourself as anonymous. But if you don't, then I'll likely say your name in addressing the question, just so you know that I'm answering it. And without further ado, we can get started. So the mantra, as always, is remember the quality of your calories matters. So when we're eating fewer calories, if our appetite is affected by GLP-1 medications, then we're going to need to make sure that as often as possible, no one's perfect, but as often as possible, make sure that you're picking high quality calories, high quality foods to make sure you're maximizing the amount of nutrients and protein for the benefit of your body as a whole. So what we're going to cover today is how common is hair loss when losing weight? Also, some potential causes that might be leading to that, as well as possible solutions, and also what to look for in terms of supplementation. And finally, I do want to make sure I leave time for any questions that you may have on this topic, or if there's another topic that comes to mind that you wanted to ask. If we have time for that, I'm happy to answer. So the big question, does weight loss equal hair loss? And I did look up the numbers to see what was out there right now. And I also wanted to compare, if we're losing weight from metabolic and bariatric surgery, how does that compare with taking weight loss medications? And the numbers that we see, of course, look very promising here. According to the literature that I was reading, almost more than 50% of patients who had metabolic and bariatric surgery report experiencing hair loss within that first year, as compared to weight loss medications, where it's closer to 3 to 6% of patients reporting that, according to the clinical trials. However, and this is why I list anecdotally, we see these numbers and we look at them, but I think if we ourselves are experiencing it, we think, well, those numbers don't matter. It's happening to me, it matters to me. And that's very valid and important. So good news starting out in terms of looking at side effects, but again, if it's happening to you personally, then who cares if it says 3 to 6%? You were part of that number, and undoubtedly you want to address it. So what could be the reason for this? One that I listed at the top, could be a combination of all of these, or it could be one. The one I listed at the top tends to be related to weight loss. It's called telogen effluvium. And that is describing hair loss that occurs after a stressful life event. So rapid weight loss, even if that's something we're seeking or going for, that is a stressor on the body. Again, the good news about that is it's considered to be temporary, so it's not going to be forever, but it can still be very distressing to experience it. But of course, health conditions can also be a factor. Our genetics play a role, or if we have some other endocrine disorder, such as type 2 diabetes or PCOS, or if we have malabsorptive conditions like Crohn's disease, celiac disease, or maybe a previous surgery on our intestines. There are some medications also that have a listed side effect of hair loss, so be sure to speak with your doctor about your current medication regimen if you're concerned that one of those could be contributing to it. And then finally, nutrient deficiencies or excesses could be playing a factor. So with fewer calories, like I mentioned, your intake of certain nutrients may be decreased. And so that's a possibility and worth looking into. but be aware it is possible to get too much of a good thing as well. And we'll touch on that too. In terms of nutrient deficiencies, I wanted to list in the next couple of slides the most common nutrient deficiencies that are associated with hair loss. That doesn't mean that you would necessarily have all of these, but these are the ones that are connected to hair loss in some way. So iron could be a major player. And I've also listed on the side of each one of these food sources of these nutrients, so you're aware of the foods that you could look for. So with many of these, animal protein is involved, just like iron, but you can also find that in legumes or beans, as well as vegetables, spinach being the most famous one, I think, from many people. And with iron in food, as well as with supplements, it is much more easily absorbed when consumed with a vitamin C source, be that an orange or a citrus high in vitamin C, or if someone is taking a vitamin C supplement. Also, I noticed that taking with L-lysine, which it can be found in foods, but supplement as well, can help when taken with iron, food, or supplement to help reduce hair shedding. Zinc, of course, also can be found in animal proteins, as well as oats and pumpkin seeds. As far as vitamin D goes, there are relatively few food sources out there, but I did list a few, such as egg yolks, mushrooms, and fortified foods. Of course, egg yolks are the vitamin D content is much higher in essentially free range or pastured chickens that are out in the sun. And mushrooms oftentimes are with a UV lamp that can sort of help with that. But because there are so few food sources and many of us use sunscreen to block the sun's rays, which would be normally the main player in terms of vitamin D, supplementation may be needed in that case. Biotin is also associated with hair health. Many of us hear about that, which can be found in egg yolks, meat, fish, seeds, eggs, as well as sweet potato. And protein, which sort of envelop all of these. And of course, you can find those both in animal and plant sources. The next few nutrient deficiencies out there that are associated with hair loss are vitamin A, which again found in eggs, as well as dark green, orange, and yellow fruits and vegetables. So I listed a few options there as some good sources. I also touch on niacin, which are found in protein-rich foods, nuts and seeds, and beans. Selenium, as well as healthy fats. So the fatty fish and walnuts, ground flax seeds, chia seeds, etc. As far as selenium goes, I will mention Brazil nuts are considered one of the largest sources of selenium. So high, in fact, that it's recommended you not eat more than 4 in a day, just because then you actually approach the upper levels of selenium that you can tolerate. Now, we're talking about the foods that have the nutrients where if you're deficient in, may be a player in hair loss. But since we talked about decreased appetite and possibly not eating enough of them to lead to this deficiency, you might be thinking, well, that's all well and good. I'm glad that I know about the food sources because I could use a little more focus on this. But I think you're probably thinking, what about supplements? I can't possibly eat another bite of food. So supplements are worth thinking about, but of course, be aware if you're not deficient in these nutrients, in specific nutrients, additional supplementation is unlikely to help. But if a specific deficiency is verified, then if you can aim for a product that focuses on that nutrient, especially in that nutrient alone versus one with multiple ingredients, that would probably be the best pathway to go. Also from a cost standpoint. And I will touch on that more later. Also, be aware that certain supplements may cause hair loss, such as DHEA supplements, and again, high doses of selenium or vitamin A are associated with hair loss. Also, while researching this again, I saw that there was one report, and that's just one report out of, I'm sure, many, but one report of hair loss was associated with St. John's wort. So that one may not really be a factor, but I wanted to mention that. Also, I did a little more research on some other supplements that are suggested. So these aren't specific nutrients like we were talking, but some suggested items that may be helpful. And I'm listing these out but there's no strong evidence. There's some very small, maybe lower quality studies or anecdotal reports by others. But since there was some reports about that, I wanted to list these out. But I do encourage you to always speak with your doctor or provider first before starting them. So the first one that stood out to me was one called wheat polar lipid complex. And that's found in these two products. One's called phytoceramides advanced formula, created by Swanson. And the other one is glutathione skin brightener. And that was by the company Now Solutions. And so they did a study with 66 women. Again, that's a pretty small sample size, but it showed pretty good promise. Also, cysteine or acetylcysteine may be a reasonable thing to consider. Also, since there are many, many multi-ingredient products out there that are geared toward hair loss and concerns about hair loss, I wanted to list the ones that had some more compelling reports associated with it. And those are the following. So Hair Strong gummies, one called Lambda Pill hair density capsules, another one called Norcrin, excuse me. And then the last one, Viviscal, which is the one that I've heard more often among all of these. And so these ones had more promising reports that I was reading. However, I'd like to mention the Viviscal in particular has had some reports, even on Amazon reviews, of liver injury or elevated liver enzymes. And it seems that there are certain ingredients in that product associated or connected with that. Again, that's not for everybody. That's not a promise that if you take it, that will happen. But I wanted to mention it so to emphasize how important it is to speak with your doctor or provider about whether or not that is a smart supplement to start. And speaking of multi-ingredient products, again, I know I've sort of touched on it here and there, but this is where I want to focus in, where it is possible to get too much of a good thing. A phrase that I use for food and supplements is the portion makes the poison. So vitamins, minerals are very important for us, but if we get too much of a good thing, either by eating foods that are high in it, along with supplements, or in the case of many people that I've seen, multiple different supplements taken in one day, but they all have, for example, vitamin A in each one of them. And so while one particular supplement on its own wouldn't be exorbitantly high, taking that along with the 2 or more additional supplements of the day can then put you in that higher zone. Because as I mentioned earlier, high doses of selenium and vitamin A can actually lead to hair loss. So if you're losing hair, but you already have decent levels of both of these, selenium and vitamin, then taking more is not actually going to help, but might undo any progress that you already were finding. So my suggestions are that you want to avoid going over 200 to 300 micrograms per selenium. And just so you're aware, the tolerable upper intake level for selenium is actually 400 micrograms, but effects have been seen at lower doses, at lower amounts. I'm listing that down to just avoid it going over those amounts, because again, you also get it in food. And then the tolerable upper intake level for vitamin A is 3,000 micrograms. So for example, I have this supplement label from Nutrafol, also a relatively popular brand for people who may be losing their hair and want to take something. In fact, I know some people who take it and they're happy with their results and they're seeing no problems. But it's one that I still encourage caution with, because you can see here with vitamin A, if the upper intake level is 3,000 and you're getting half of it through here, that's what time to be mindful of. Are you getting vitamin A from anywhere else in high amounts that could add up to being over the 3,000 microgram level? As for selenium, you're already at 200 micrograms, so that's within the range that I would suggest not going over. So again, that's why it's important to be very careful and selective with the supplements you may want to pick. Finally, too much biotin. It doesn't seem like there's really a problem with any problems it could cause to you personally, but over 10,000 micrograms a day, there's a possibility it can interfere with lab tests. It can cause falsely high or falsely low results. So you could get an incorrect result if you were getting a thyroid function test. And if you're getting your thyroid tested, having an accurate result is important for everyone involved. And any other lab tests as well. Last time I presented this, I was asked about serums or shampoos. And of course, as a dietitian, I want to stay in my lane. So they are out there, and I've heard good reports about some of them, but I definitely recommend speaking with a dermatologist or your provider about those options. And as for topical treatments that aren't necessarily serums or shampoos, since, this is somewhat in my wheelhouse because it's a black seed oil, it does look like that may be potentially beneficial, but more studies are definitely needed. And still, since it's not being consumed, I would suggest, again, speaking with your dermatologist or provider before starting that. But I wanted to at least mention about the existence of this. So, putting it together, hair loss can happen for many reasons, and improper nutrition is definitely one of them. And so in the case of a nutrient deficiency, increasing specific foods or using a supplement can help. But be sure if you're going to be using a supplement to choose them carefully. So read the labels, speak with your doctor or provider, just to make sure that what you're taking is not too high in quantity, or it's not going to interfere with any other medication or supplement you're taking. And again, your provider may be able to guide you on a serum or shampoo option as well. But of course, now is your time to shine. And so if you have any questions, again, at the bottom left of your screen is a little Q&A button where you can select that to ask. And feel free to opt to be anonymous if you'd like, or if you want, you can always use your name and just know that I will likely state your name simply so that I can make sure to let you know that I'm answering your specific question. I'll also mention, if you think of a question later, or if you just rather have that question answered offline, by all means, feel free to contact the Premier Weight Loss staff and send them a message. They will be more than happy to, they can answer it themselves, answer it, or they can send that question you have to me, and I will be happy to get back to you on that. That's not a problem at all. Probably wait for one more minute because I want to make sure I give everyone time to type out a message. I'll wait for one more minute. Well, I don't believe we have any questions come in, but again, feel free to contact the Premier Weight Loss staff if any questions come up later. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you join me this afternoon. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And again, thank you for joining me. I hope I get to see you in the next one. A wonderful afternoon.